If you walk past me in that dress again, you won't make it to the balcony. That was the terrifying warning I got from Dante Moretti, the most dangerous mafia boss in the city. I thought he was just joking. But 10 minutes later, I wasn't in a cab going home. I was locked inside his bulletproof car. He didn't kidnap me to hurt me, though. He kidnapped me because I just became the #1 target in a bloody mob war. And now, my ruthless captor is my only chance at survival. Let's look at this opening frame together. You and I, we find Ella framed in a wide, muted shot, surrounded by a world of soft beiges and fading grays. She moves through life, trying to stay entirely invisible, wearing her daily routine like armor against the world. But tragedy usually strikes the moment that routine fractures. The camera suddenly cuts to her overbearing friend, bullying Ella into putting on a loud, blood-red dress for the night. You can practically feel her hesitation in the heavy slump of her shoulders, watching her cave in just to keep the peace. As the lighting grows dark, it leaves us with a difficult reality to swallow. If you always let other people draw your boundaries, you are just paving your own road to the slaughterhouse. The camera pushes into a tight close-up right before the party begins. Against her pale skin, that red fabric looks exactly like an open wound. Pay attention to the frantic fluttering of her fingers as she pulls at the hem. It is a desperate, unconscious plea for a safety she does not have. The background noise drops away entirely, leaving nothing but the sound of her panicked breathing. Even so, she forces a bright smile. She steps inside the penthouse, instantly swallowed by glaring lights, suffocating wealth, and the heavy shadow of Marco. Her gut instinct screams at her to run, yet she swallows her fear just to avoid causing a scene. It is a quiet, tragic surrender. Whenever we silence our gut instincts to keep someone else comfortable, we are actively helping them destroy us. The lens pans across the massive room, capturing a space built purely to intimidate. Ella presses her spine flat against the cold wall. She grips a champagne glass with white knuckles, holding onto it like it might actually save her. Then the focus shifts. Deep in the background, far from the harsh lighting, stands Dante. He is a masterclass in absolute stillness. The guests around him laugh, but his smile is completely theatrical. It is a cold performance that never reaches the terrifying, dead expression in his eyes. Ella catches his stare. Her breath hitches, and she instantly snaps her gaze down to the floor. It is a fatal mistake. Looking away from the monster in the room never makes you invisible. It only proves to him that you are exactly the prey he is looking for. I want us to pause on this frame for a second. The lighting shifts to a sickening, heavy yellow as pure panic takes over her mind. You can almost feel her frantic pulse hammering right through the screen. Blinded by her own fear, she tries to slip away unnoticed, stumbling into the darkest corner of the room. The thick smell of cigar smoke hits her a second too late. Dante says the word "stop," and it cuts through the party noise like a knife. His voice holds zero emotion. It is a terrifying, absolute command. The camera locks the two of them into a harsh two-shot. He orders her to come closer, stripping away the last illusion of free will she had left. It is a haunting truth. When raw panic takes the wheel, it blinds us so completely that we sprint straight into the jaws of the wolf. The scene cuts to a desolate, poorly lit hallway. Long shadows stretch against the walls as Ella stammers out a broken excuse. She desperately tries to laugh the heavy tension away. Dante says absolutely nothing. He simply tilts his head. The camera catches a predatory gleam in his eye as he calculates exactly how easy it will be to break her. He makes a quiet, terrifying comment about her dress, wrapping a violent threat inside a soft tone. Her mind short-circuits. You can see her frantic eyes, trying to process his words as a joke, clinging to a false denial that will be her ruin. The lesson here is as undeniable as gravity. When a truly dangerous person shows you what they are capable of, you have to believe them the very first time. Second chances do not exist here. She forces a hollow, paper-thin laugh and turns around, practically bolting out onto the terrace. The ambient party noise fades into a sharp, high-pitched ringing. We watch her press her violently trembling hands flat against the freezing glass of the balcony. She gasps for air in the cold night, trying to convince herself it was all just an awkward joke. Slipping back inside, she glues herself to her friend's side. She hopelessly believes that being in a crowd will protect her. But the camera lingers on Dante, watching her every move from the shadows. The sheer tragedy of human denial is on full display in this shot. You cannot hide in a crowded room from someone who has already marked your soul. Once the hunter catches your scent, burying your head in the sand will never save you. Notice the agonizing tension in her body now. Every few seconds, her eyes nervously dart back to that dark corner. Dante has not moved a single inch, yet his cold stare dominates the entire room. He holds her gaze until she is forced to look down at the floor. It is a silent, crushing display of submission. Exhausted down to her bones, she turns down her friend's offer to stay the night. She just wants to go home and lock her door. Then Marco glides into the frame. He wears a slick, practiced smile, insisting that his private driver take her home. It looks like a polite favor, but the camera blocking tells us it is an absolute command. The lesson is grim. The most devastating traps in life are often built with the eager help of the friends we thought we could trust. Stick with me here, because this is where the heartbreak truly sets in. Ella stands alone on the freezing curb. A heavy, black sedan rolls into the frame, its dark windows swallowing the streetlights. Every instinct she has is screaming at her not to get inside. You can see the terror vibrating in a clenched jaw. But years of being taught to be polite, to never cause a scene, push her forward. She slides into the back seat, and the heavy door slams shut with terrifying finality. Sitting right beside her in the suffocating darkness is Dante. He is perfectly, impossibly still. She can barely draw a breath. It teaches us an unforgiving truth. When you choose social politeness over listening to your own gut instincts, you are simply booking your own one-way ticket to disaster. The interior of the car is shot like a claustrophobic coffin. Streetlights flash across Dante's face, revealing cold eyes that simply do not blink. He leans in close. His voice drops to a quiet, lethal whisper that feels so much worse than a scream. He twists the narrative entirely, softly accusing her of wandering onto his territory. He makes her feel like this nightmare is her own fault. In her blind panic earlier, she had practically delivered herself right into his lap. Now he smiles, calling this abduction a rescue, and framing his iron cage as a sanctuary. It is a masterful, sickening display of manipulation. It leaves us with a chilling realization. The greatest monsters do not need to drag you away screaming. They just arrange the board so you willingly walk into their waiting arms. We watch Ella's body completely shut down in real time. It is pure, unfiltered paralysis. When he finally murmurs his own name, the arrogance in his voice lands on her chest like an anvil. You can see her eyes frantically darting toward the locked door handle. Her brain is screaming for her to jump out into the moving traffic, but her limbs refuse to move. The contrast between them is jarring. Dante leans back, casually scrolling through his phone as if he is just commuting to work. He lets the heavy, suffocating silence bleed her dry, offering zero answers and demanding absolute control. The camera lingers on her frozen hands. It is a dark lesson in survival. When fear paralyzes you instead of pushing you to fight, the predator does not even have to hunt. They already own your future. The narrative shifts into a dark revelation. Dante coldly explains she is merely collateral damage in a hidden war she never knew existed. Tears spill over Ella's cheeks as she begs him, trading a promise of silence for her life. But then, he drops his voice and says her first name. That single word shatters her remaining defenses like glass. With surgical precision, he tears down everything she believed about her world. He reveals her closest friends are deeply entangled in a criminal syndicate. A single photograph has turned her from an invisible nobody into a valuable pawn. It is a painful scene, but it carries a vital truth. Choosing to remain naive does not protect you from the dark. Closing your eyes to reality only guarantees the shadows will eventually swallow you whole. You and I have reached the end of the ride together. Ella shakes her head, clinging to the hope that she is just too boring to matter. Dante expertly twists that against her. He paints a gruesome picture of what his rivals would do, positioning himself as her only savior. It is the beginning of a twisted, psychological trap. When she guesses she is just bait for Marco, his eyes go dead. He snaps a denial so harsh it steals her breath. The car finally glides to a halt in front of a massive compound. Its towering stone walls look exactly like Dante's mind. They are cold, impenetrable, and built to hold prisoners. As the heavy iron gates slam shut, we are left with a final truth. Trying to make yourself small will never save you once you step into the shadow of a true monster. You and I are going to step into the frame right here and watch this tragedy unfold. Dante steps out of the black sedan, the heavy thud of the door echoing like a judge dropping a gavel. He never looks back at Ella. It is a masterclass in silent cruelty, a deliberate erasure that forces her to follow his shadow just to stay grounded. She steps into the cavernous hall, shivering. The air smells of rich leather, but that cannot hide the metallic chill of a tomb. Dante delivers a flat command to a guard in the dim light, logging her arrival not as a living woman, but as mere property. There is a brutal truth we must acknowledge in moments like this. When a person is stripped of every single choice, reluctant obedience quickly turns into a desperate instinct just to survive. Notice how the lighting softens here, creating a tragic illusion. Dante locks her inside a sprawling, luxury suite. The walls are draped in silk, but make no mistake, we are staring at a beautifully gilded cage. Ella stands by the grand window, her reflection pale and trembling against the glass, demanding to know when she can leave. Dante simply adjusts his cuffs, his face a total blank slate. "You will remain until I decide otherwise," he murmurs. The heavy iron lock engages with a sickening final click. The psychological theater has officially begun, playing out like a dark drama. The lesson etched into this moment is one we cannot ignore. The second another human being dictates where your footsteps can fall, the cage is complete, no matter how soft the velvet cushions are. The instant that deadbolt slides into place, you can almost hear the oxygen being sucked out of the room. Dante frames this imprisonment as a noble shield of protection, but Ella sees only the raw truth of a kidnapping. "I never asked for your salvation," her voice cracks, echoing off the high ceilings in total powerlessness. Dante pauses by the door. A tiny flinch in his jaw betrays a flicker of pity beneath his cold exterior. Yet, when she whispers Marco's name, asking why he could not keep her safe, the arrogant king actually stumbles. His flawless armor cracks for just a second. The truth of our shared human condition reveals itself right here. Genuine protection gives a person the strength to stand tall, but control disguised as a savior only strips away the soul. Listen to his chilling reply. It is a clear window into the paranoid mind of a crime boss. He breathes out, claiming he cannot trust a single living soul with her safety, plunging her into an abyss of isolation. She paces the floor all night, jumping at every creak. Morning light bleeds through the curtains, revealing a silver tray and a note signed with one dark initial. The ink stubbornly insists she is merely a guest. An absolute masterpiece of gaslighting. By the third day, she traces the cold walls and begins to accept her fate. We have to remember this bitter wisdom in our daily lives. The darkest manipulations are often wrapped in pretty paper, designed entirely to make you doubt the very real truth staring you right in the face. 4 days pass like a bad dream. The house's silence grows so loud it rings in her ears, yet the phantom weight of his gaze rests on her everywhere she turns. She finally descends the staircase, finding him sipping black coffee in the morning light. He looks terrifyingly domesticated. Her voice shakes as she demands to walk out the front door. Dante does not even blink. His face is carved from marble, dead to her tears. When she screams at his logic, he quietly sets the porcelain cup down. His dark eyes lock onto hers, promising that stepping off the grass guarantees she will be hunted and killed within 48 hours. The lesson here absolutely breaks the heart. Predators build a world so full of manufactured terror that the caged bird eventually begs the snake for safety. Stick with me on this tight, suffocating close-up. He speaks with such a terrifying, deadpan calm that it sends a violent shudder down her spine. Her hands grip the edge of the mahogany table. She begs for just one rational reason why she is trapped in this nightmare. Dante stands up slowly, casting a long shadow over her frame. His justification is a pure tragedy. He admits, almost in a whisper, that he took her simply because she walked past him wearing that specific dress. An innocent woman merely breathing in his orbit triggered a catastrophic obsession. It is a sobering lesson about the fragility of life. Sometimes, the worst trauma is just a lightning strike of chance. We have to remember that it is never your fault for simply walking through the wrong line of sight. Picture him returning in the dead of night. The adrenaline of violence still radiates from his blood-stained cuffs, yet he is bound by a pathetic, desperate ritual. Every evening, he stops exactly at the threshold of her doorway. His silhouette refuses to cross onto her carpet, quietly asking if she feels safe. Her silence is her last dying ember of rebellion. But the television screen soon betrays her. The news anchor reports a string of bloody disappearances in the city, painting a world dripping in absolute chaos. She covers her mouth, horrified by the paradox. This scene teaches us a dark truth about human frailty. When the world outside the window looks like pure hell, the devil's living room slowly begins to feel like a warm, inviting sanctuary. The screen flashes a grainy photo of Marco, but before she can process it, the signal dies. The truth is erased in real time. The sudden darkness sends her heart into a frantic drumbeat. With trembling fingers, she types a desperate message to her best friend, Layla. The reply comes on the 8th dawn. Layla types that she is unharmed, but then delivers the fatal blow. She begs Ella to just trust Dante. It is a total betrayal. Her closest friend has surrendered to the monster. Ella collapses against the wall, her chest heaving with ragged sobs. Hours later, she wanders the halls, actively searching for him. It exposes a heartbreaking reality of the human soul. When our lighthouses burn down, we will crawl toward any flickering flame, even the one that set the fire in the first place. He plays the tormented savior beautifully, resting his head in his hands by the fireplace. But let's take a closer look at Ella's posture. The weeping victim is gone, replaced by a woman fueled by the raw core of survival. She steps into his space. Her voice slices through the air as she tears apart his web of lies, demanding to know the real shape of this protection. She wants the unvarnished truth. The camera pushes in as Dante realizes his silent doll has woken up. He stands slowly, the leather chair groaning, and deliberately steps into her breathing space. It is a terrifying moment. Here is a life lesson to carry with you. Finding the courage to use your voice against absolute tyranny forces the oppressor to look you in the eyes and see a real human being, not just a ghost. The shadows of the room seem to press down as he finally bleeds the ugly truth. A merciless war has broken out with a rival crime family, and the streets are running red. These enemies do not care about collateral damage. They slaughter anyone standing in the periphery. Ella backs away, trying to use logic like a shield. She insists she is a nobody, a ghost to these men. Dante's eyes remain dead and cold as he shatters her illusion. He plainly explains that monsters do not ask for a resume before pulling the trigger. When she weeps, asking why Marco left her to this fate, the tragedy sets in. We all have to learn this unforgiving rule of life. Standing too close to the fire comes with a terrible price, and merely closing your eyes to the flames will never stop you from burning. Listen to the poison of his arrogance here. He speaks of Marco like a foolish child, painting his own violent methods as the only flawless design in the universe. Ella stares at him, realizing this man has devoured her destiny. He is playing a dark god with her very heartbeat. He leans in, his voice dropping to a mocking hum, asking if she would have come with him by choice. Her chin lifts. Her fierce defiance rejects his madness. Instead of screaming, she asks the one question that cuts deep. Why does her breathing even matter to him? It is a masterstroke in a tragic play. This reminds us of a vital truth. True strength is never about holding the chains that bind someone. Real power is the quiet courage to look right into the devil's eyes and question his fragile heart. The air turns heavy, thick with unspoken sins. He closes the distance until she feels the heat radiating off his chest, whispering the confession that seals their fate. From the first second he saw her face in the crowd, he knew she would be the wrecking ball that destroyed his empire. This is the tragedy of his blackened soul. He kidnapped her to keep her heart beating. Knowing this obsession would rot him from the insides or out, he suddenly turns away, slamming his emotional doors shut, and barks an order for her to sleep. She runs upstairs, her hands shaking violently. At dawn, a chorus of screaming men shatters the morning peace. We must take this lesson to heart. An obsession rooted in darkness can never grow into a beautiful garden. It will only ever reap a bitter harvest of absolute ruin. Follow me to the top of the stairs, where Ella peers through the wood at a foyer turned into a slaughterhouse. Dante stands in shattered glass, a predator tearing apart an intruder, screaming in broken Russian. The snap of bone and crimson spray paint, a grim picture on pristine marble. Ella grips the rail, paralyzed by the violence below. Then, time simply stops. Dante looks up, his dark eyes locking onto hers through a haze of blood. For one agonizing heartbeat, this cold killer looks shattered, that she has seen his true face. You and I can take a harsh truth from this moment. You can build the strongest fortress imaginable, but the sins you commit outside will always find a way to bleed under your own door. The sudden absence of violence leaves the manor drowning in a heavy, ringing silence. We watch Luca retreat to the dimly lit library, shivering in the cold grip of undeniable shock. An entire hour bleeds away before Vittorio appears in the doorway, sporting a bruised gash along his jaw. With an agonizing gentleness, he asks if she is all right, a painfully absurd question from a captor. Her breath shatters in her chest. She screams that the monster has finally found them both. Vittorio simply steps into the pale moonlight, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a devastating calm. He whispers that the monster did not find them at all. It found him. The lesson here is absolute. We can never outrun a darkness that is specifically hunting the very shadow we choose to stand beside. Let us examine this fracture piece by piece. Ella quietly asks about the dead intruder. Dante shows immediate physical resistance, his jaw locking tight. He tells her she really does not want to know the mechanics of his violence. She studies this damaged predator and names his harsh reality aloud, the constant threat of death. Dante offers only a minimal nod. When she breaks down weeping, mourning her forced role in this nightmare, Dante reaches out. His hand actually shakes as he awkwardly brushes her hair. The strange part, she allows the touch. They are becoming partners trapped in a gilded cage. It reveals a simple truth about our minds. Fear is always fastest builder of false affection, tricking us into finding comfort in the very hands that hold us captive. Look at the brutal irony of this control. Dante runs his empire from the compound to keep a security wall around Ella, leaving his study door cracked to watch her. He stays physically close, yet entirely detached. Hardened criminals walk these halls, their hushed voices dying the second she steps into view. They try to hide the violence, but the ugly truth bleeds into every room. The estate is dripping with wealth, yet those high stone walls press down on her mind with a crushing weight. She paces the perfect lawns every day, followed by men with guns. This paints a very clear picture of human nature. A cage made of pure gold is still a cage, and all the luxury in the world can never replace the simple freedom of choosing your own path. By day 10 of isolation, the cracks start to show. Ella sits in a massive room, her eyes blankly glued to a screen. She checks out of reality while Dante plays the burdened crime boss. But eventually, the mental pressure shatters her calm. You and I have probably seen this exact breaking point in people pushed too far. She catches him at midnight, drinking alone, shoulders slumping under the weight of his empire. He deflects, dryly asking why she is awake. She begs for a brief moment outside, warning him she is losing her mind. Dante shuts her down with cold logic about the dangers out there, but she does not care about the physical risk. Her plea teaches us something profound. Sometimes we fight the hardest not to escape a place, but to stop ourselves from fading away entirely. She pushes against his iron grip, demanding he send his guards with her if he has to. She needs proof that she is still a breathing person, not just furniture. Surprisingly, this raw burst of emotion pierces his thick armor. The boss physically gives in, setting his glass down. He asks where she wants to go, even though she has not thought past the sheer panic of leaving. Anywhere will do. 20 minutes later, they are sealed inside a sleek, fast car. But it is really just a rolling version of her cage. She watches the city lights smear into bright blurs while he grips the steering wheel like a vice. This moment reveals a tough pill to swallow. Running from your problems does not mean much if you just end up trapped in a much faster version of the exact same prison. Dante says nothing about where they are going. They pull into an empty lot on the edge of the river. It is a bleak spot, just black water and total isolation. He cuts the engine, but stays locked up tight. Then, just for a second, his heavy mental walls drop. He admits this dark stretch of water is where he comes to clear his head. Ella is surprised that a ruthless boss needs a place to breathe. Dante gives a haunting reply, confessing that he is just really good at faking his strength. It shows the heavy toll of power. Being in charge is often just a highly polished act of pretending you are not afraid. She finally breaks the quiet to strike at the real issue. It highlights a basic human truth. We will always look for the soft, broken spots in the people who hold power over us. Stick with me, because this exchange tells us everything. Dante tries to dodge her questions, his hands choking the steering wheel to calm his nerves. But Ella does not let up. She knows the shooter back at the house was aiming specifically for him. His jaw tightens, rattled that his prisoner has backed him into a corner. When he looks at her, his tough exterior is gone. He admits his biggest mistake. He saw her at the party and could not walk away. His dark obsession forced him to step in himself. He confesses he simply cannot let her go. She tries to rationalize it, pretending he only wants to keep her safe. But we need to remember a vital life lesson here. You can never use pure logic to make sense of a mind that is already broken by a deep, selfish obsession. He shoots that idea down immediately, his voice cracking under the emotional weight. He openly admits that keeping her locked up is driven by pure, selfish desire. The irony is staggering. A ruthless boss is entirely paralyzed by his own twisted feelings. He lists the ways she should be reacting. Screaming, fighting, running for her life. Yet, she does none of that. He cannot bring himself to say the words, but the sickness between them is locked in. It is the dark pull of a trauma bond, dragging them into a shared fantasy, despite the deadly reality. It teaches us a grim truth about human nature. Sometimes, our own hearts will actively guide us straight toward our own destruction. She quietly admits she is not angry with him. He takes those words like a heavy physical blow to the head. When their eyes meet again, Dante's mask is entirely gone. We get a rare look at the broken man hiding beneath the armor. He breathes her name, torn between claiming what is his and completely surrendering. They are inches away from crossing a line they can never come back from. But the real world rudely cuts in. His phone buzzes, and that quiet bubble around them instantly pops. He reads the message, and his cold walls slam right back into place. He barks an order to move, his voice dropping to an icy tone. He throws the car into gear, his knuckles turning pure white. The illusion is over. We must remember this hard fact of life. You can hide in a quiet dream for a little while, but reality always finds you, and it usually arrives with absolute vengeance. Ella spirals into panic, begging to know what is wrong. Dante delivers the crushing blow. A rival family found their compound. That heavily guarded fortress they just left has been overrun. He has no idea how they were tracked, and raw rage vibrates under his tight voice. Going back is off the table. The next hour is a blur of tearing down dark backroads at breakneck speeds. They finally stop at a run-down cabin, hidden deep in the woods. This is a massive fall from grace for a man used to ruling from a high tower. He steps out of the car, scanning the shadows before rushing her inside. It shows us exactly what happens when our walls fall. Strip away the illusion of safety, and every single one of us reverts to our most basic, primal survival instincts. The cabin feels like a bare, cold cell. Dante locks the door and starts hammering at his phone in an anxious loop. Ella nervously asks if they are safe. His answer is a chilling slice of dread. Safe for now. When she asks for the plan, his face shifts. This untouchable king is feeling genuine fear. He admits he has no next move. Ella feels her world spinning, begging for a way out. You and I can clearly see the tragedy in what happens next. He walks over, holding her face with an unsettling gentleness. He tells her to stay close, promising to burn the world down to keep them alive. But it is just a sweet, hollow lie. It reveals a sad human truth. We often tell the people we care about beautiful stories simply to hide the terrifying fact that the end is already standing in the room. Let us step into the room and watch this breakdown together. She starts to cry, shattering his fragile illusion by pointing out how likely they are to fail. He catches a tear with his thumb, promising to choose death over surrender. That absolute certainty finally breaks her. She pulls his hands to her face, begging him not to throw his life away. They lean in, foreheads resting together in the dim light, building a mental wall against the dark. Neither dares to use the bed. She curls into a ball on a broken sofa, while he paces like a caged wolf, trying to rebuild his ruined empire. The lesson here is one of survival. When logic dictates that all hope is lost, the mind will build a fortress out of nothing but a fleeting human touch just to make it through the night. Watch how survival instincts warp under pressure. Ella listens to his phone call, hearing him give orders with a fake calm. The truth is written all over his stiff shoulders and restless hands. He hangs up, his eyes empty, and drops the heavy truth. The enemy breached their safe house 20 minutes after they fled. A cold spike of dread hits her chest. Then he delivers the final blow. The rival crew stole every single file. Their lives are exposed, and the clock is running out. Frozen by the crushing weight of the chaos, she simply nods. It brings us to a harsh truth about fear. True, massive panic does not always scream or thrash around in the open. Sometimes it is perfectly silent, freezing you from the inside out until all you can do is accept the incoming nightmare. She asks how the fortress fell. Dante admits they were sold out. When she asks if the traitor was a friend, he blankly states the problem has been buried. This cold lack of emotion reveals his broken mind. He pours water, his brain racing, and orders her to sleep before they run. When she asks where they are going, he drops a terrifying confession. He has no idea. Pay close attention to this moment. When a man who has lied his entire life finally tells the truth, you are looking at the end of the line. The life lesson here is grim. The most terrifying thing a habitual manipulator can ever do is simply run out of lies. Paralyzed by the raw fear of the unknown, she shrinks back to the old mattress, unable to close her eyes as the clock ticks down. You and I are going to step into the suffocating shadows of this room together. Watch Luca. Her mind is cracking under the heavy weight of exhaustion, caught in the terrifying grip of a trauma bond. Every sound in the dark, the rattling glass, the groaning floorboards, spikes her fear. Stripped of all defenses, she crawls toward Vittorio. He sits in the gloom, a violent man with a loaded gun by his side. He softly asks if she is awake. She draws closer to the source of her own nightmare. As their shoulders finally touch, a tragic peace washes over her trembling body. The lesson here is haunting but real. When surrounded by absolute darkness, the human mind will drag itself toward any warmth it can find, even if it means hugging the exact fire that is burning its life down. Let the camera linger on this strange shift. Vittorio, a man who hands out death with cold precision, drops his armor. He stares into the dark and confesses a childhood dream to be an architect. He remembers his mother leading him through old galleries, teaching him to admire the safe arches of ancient doors. He only ever wanted to build quiet sanctuaries. But his father, a ruthless criminal, demanded a monster. Hearing this, Luca instantly eases his violent sins. She looks at his hardened face and sees only a wounded boy. She whispers that his story is incredibly sad. The life lesson hiding in these shadows is bitter but true. The heaviest, most dangerous chains we are forced to drag through our lives are often the brutal expectations placed around our necks by our own parents. Vittorio brushes off the memory, claiming a quiet life is not meant for everyone, but a slight softening in his eyes betrays the lie. He asks Luca what she wanted to do with her life. She admits she wanted to teach children, simply because they do not know how to lie. When he asks why she gave up, she mumbles about crushing bills and the fear of never being good enough. Vittorio tilts his head, calling her reality sad. A submissive smile pulls at her lips. They're both completely ruined, she agrees. He repeats the word tragic, tasting the sweet victory of her absolute surrender. The lesson here is quiet but devastating. Shared brokenness is never a foundation for real love. It is just a very comfortable cage with an open door that neither prisoner has the courage to walk out of. Words fail her. Luca lets the silence speak, resting her head against his shoulder. The camera catches a slight flinch in his jaw. Her touch is cracking his iron armor. He tries to pull back, but her tears finally spill. She confesses a deep, paralyzing terror of dying alone in the dark. Vittorio offers a hollow warning, like a predator giving his prey a fake chance to run to clear his own guilt. She refuses to move. After an agonizing hesitation, his heavy arm wraps around her shaking shoulders. He whispers that she is no longer alone. The life lesson here is undeniable. Pure, naked vulnerability has the power to completely disarm even the most fiercely guarded heart. The dark room fades into pale morning light as she slowly wakes to the sharp, bitter smell of fresh coffee. The morning light frames a quiet revelation. Luca wakes on the cold floor, her head resting on his heavy jacket. It is a silent claim of protection. Across the room, Vittorio stands by the window, scanning the street like a cornered wolf. As she winces from the ache in her bones, a fleeting shadow of guilt crosses his face before the stone mask snaps back. He hands her the warm mug, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. They have 20 minutes to run and collect a blood debt. When she asks if they will be safe, a grim, humorless smile touches his lips. It points to a brutal life lesson we all must face. Perfect safety is nothing but a beautiful illusion. Sometimes, survival simply means actively choosing the specific nightmare you can actually tolerate waking up to. Stick with me, because this is where the tension finally snaps. Luca hurries to gather her things, but Vittorio suddenly snatches her wrist. His rigid grip radiates pure desperation. He forces her to look him in the eye, his voice perfectly uncompromising. If they are separated today, she must run and never look back. The conflict tearing across her face is agonizing. The twisted bond they share screams against the idea of abandonment. Her chest heaves as she finally whispers her promise to leave him behind. He searches her eyes, ensuring she means it. Before slowly letting her go, it leaves us with a painfully real life lesson. Sometimes, the absolute truest act of human devotion requires completely severing an emotional attachment just to keep the other person breathing. The concrete maze of the city swallows their car, offering a desperate veil of anonymity. Vittorio kills the engine. Without a word, he locks the doors from the outside, trapping Luca in the seat for her safety. Through the wet streaked glass, we watch him approach a crumbling house. A woman opens the door, and the sheer terror on her face is cinematic. You can see the blood drain from her cheeks. A frantic argument erupts on the porch. She desperately rejects whatever nightmare he brings. But Vittorio steps directly into her space, his whispered words freezing her solid. It reveals a very dark life lesson about human nature. When our backs are truly against the wall, we will unhesitatingly weaponize the exact emotional leverage we once swore we would never use against others. The woman's eyes dart past Vittorio, landing on Luca in the locked car. Seeing the bruised exhaustion of a fellow victim shatters her defenses. Her shoulders slump in a defeated sigh as she steps aside. Vittorio unlocks the car, coldly introducing Maria as nothing more than a tool to hide them. But stepping inside her home changes the atmosphere entirely. Unlike Vittorio's lifeless fortress, this small room is beautifully chaotic. It smells of warm bread and old wood, radiating an undeniable humanity. Here lies a beautiful, quiet life lesson, and true warmth in a home is built entirely from human love and emotional investment, never from cold money. Yet, as the front door clicks shut, the sickening tension returns. Maria knows she just invited a lethal ghost right into her safe haven. You and I need to look closely at the gravity of this moment. Maria nervously offers a seat, realizing Vittorio has dragged a firing squad to her door. She looks at Luca, recognizing the exhausted girl as the bait the underworld is hunting. Vittorio drops all pretense. He knows this is an absurd gamble, but it is the last card he holds. When he asks for a week of shelter, Maria lets out a broken laugh, absolutely terrified of the cartel slaughtering her family. Vittorio stares right through her, issuing a cold, deadpan promise to protect her bloodline. It leaves us with a very grim life lesson. A man pushed to the absolute brink of destruction will confidently sell you impossible promises just to buy himself one more single hour of survival in the dark. Maria's bitter curse fills the room, predicting his stubbornness will drag them all to the grave. Yet ancient family bonds overpower her logic, buying them exactly 7 days of borrowed time. When she leaves, Luca turns to Vittorio, desperate to understand why he would pull this innocent woman into the fire. Vittorio looks back with entirely hollow eyes. He mutters about a debt owed to his late mother, a bitter tab he is finally paying in blood. The suffocating grief in his rasp brings us to an undeniable truth. The heaviest, most dangerous debts we owe are never written on bank paper. They are carved deeply into our unhealed trauma. Luca slowly backs away, recognizing she has just pressed her bare hands against a dangerously exposed wound. The cramped walls press inward like a sealed coffin. Vittorio paces, testing rusted locks and mapping, escapes in the dark. Luca sits on the frayed mattress, her spirit ground to dust. She looks up, begging for a single shred of human comfort. Instead, he offers a cold statistic, noting they are simply harder to track here. That rigid reply shatters whatever hope she had left. Tears spill as she whispers she cannot endure another second of this nightmare. Then, we witness a beautifully tragic shift. The ruthless kingpin slowly drops to his knees before her. It leaves us with a deeply moving truth about the human condition. Real strength is never about refusing to break. It is about having the wisdom to choose exactly who you can safely collapse in front of. Vittorio's hands close over Luca's knees, the dead silence amplifying the rustle of fabric. You and I are watching the ultimate tragedy of captivity unfold. The man who dismantled her reality is now the only solid ground beneath her feet. Her voice shakes as she whispers how shattered her mind feels, and he leans in to carry the pieces. She begs to understand his dark hunger. He finally confesses the ugly truth. Her pure spirit never belonged in his violent world, yet his ravenous ego demanded he possess her anyway. The lesson here is as old as humanity itself. Our selfish pride always always compels us to crush the delicate things we forcefully lock away. He knows exactly how toxic this hunger is, yet remains entirely powerless to stop devouring her. You and I have both witnessed this absolute breaking point. Vittorio's impenetrable mask finally suffers a complete collapse. He reaches to cradle her tear-stained face, his voice splintering. He issues an agonizing ultimatum, begging her to walk away because he is completely incapable of letting her go. Every instinct screams that she should run, but logic has abandoned this room. Instead of fleeing, Luca leans into his chest, practically begging to remain in his cage. Their intimacy is stripped of romance. It is a frantic collision born of pure terror and grief. Here lies a devastating truth about human nature. The choices that guarantee our absolute destruction are often the very ones we make with terrifying, crystal-clear certainty. The camera pushes slowly into the dim room, letting the heavy silence breathe. They pull apart just enough to catch their breath, and Dantese whispers her name like a desperate plea from a drowning man. But Ella does not run. Her trembling fingers pull the very source of her destruction closer. Watch how the harsh shadows map his face as he offers her one final chance to walk away. She refuses. Her addiction to his darkness is absolute. Later, as cold moonlight cuts through the blinds, he traces slow, rhythmic circles on her bare shoulder. She anchors her fragile sanity to the steady thud of his corrupted heart. There is a brutal, enduring lesson hiding inside this quiet frame. A stolen moment of peace is always the most dangerous lie a broken soul can tell itself. The lighting shifts sharply, casting half of Dante's face in deep obsidian shadow. He confesses his terror, his voice barely a hollow rasp. In his brutal reality, loving someone is the exact same thing as handing a loaded gun to your worst enemy. Ella leans in, her eyes wide with the tragic hope that they can just run away and leave the blood behind. But Dante knows the script of this tragedy. The syndicate never allows clean exits. It bleeds you until there is nothing left but dust. As she begs him to believe they can fight the darkness together, he simply pulls her tight against his chest. The truth we learn from this impossible frame is a heavy one. You can beg the devil for a compromise, but a violent world will always return to collect its pound of flesh. This scene plays out like a slow-motion car crash. Ella trembles as she accuses him of being blind to their reality. Dante does not raise his voice. He deflects, warning she has no idea what is waiting outside. When she demands the truth, he turns away. He tells her to close her eyes, promising they will figure it out at sunrise. The camera lingers, revealing they both know it is a lie. The inevitable strikes before dawn. Ella wakes to cold sheets and deafening silence. Her hands frantically search the empty space before she screams his name into the hollow room. You and I will have to face this stark reality eventually. Pushing away the truth never stops the nightmare from coming. It only guarantees you will be entirely alone when it finally breaks down the door. The camera tracks Ella down the dim stairs, her body wound tight as a piano wire. In the kitchen, morning light cuts across Maria, whose hands rhythmically punish dough on the counter. When Ella asks where Dante went, Maria does not blink. Her voice is stone as she confirms he is gone. Ella's chest heaves with panic. Maria stops, pinning her with a hollow stare. She warns that Dante has been drowning in blood since childhood, and loving him will only drag him under. Faster. Ella chokes on denial, but the brutal realization bleeds through her eyes. She is the very thing that will get him killed. This tragedy exposes a painful truth. We often disguise our own selfish terror of being left alone as a noble desire to save the broken monsters we fall in love with. Ella tries to wash the dishes, her hands shaking so violently the porcelain rattles. Maria snatches the cloth away, banishing her to shadows. The isolation is deafening. We watch Ella pacing the upper floor like a ghost trapped in purgatory. She stares out the rain-streaked window for hours, mourning a man who might already be a corpse. As the sky bleeds into a bruised purple, her terror boils over. She rushes downstairs, finding Maria clutching a wooden rosary, whispering frantic prayers. Ella chokes out that he is too late. Maria coldly tells her to find God. It is a haunting tableau of two women waiting for the executioner's knock. We must recognize this stark truth about human nature. When our lives are entirely stripped of control, we will always fall to our knees and blindly beg the silent sky for a miracle. The heavy silence shatters as the front door tears open. Ella flies down the corridor, stopping dead at the nightmare in the threshold. Dante looks like a butcher. His coat is wet with blood, his knuckles shredded. He carries the empty eyes of a killer until they lock onto hers. Instantly, his rigid posture crumbles. He rasps that the blood is not his own. Any rational person would run screaming. Instead, Ella lets out a broken sob and throws her arms around his ruined body, burying her face in the gore. She clings to him as if he is her only salvation. We must look closely at this terrible devotion. The most heartbreaking lesson in life is that when you are truly starved for love, you will eventually convince yourself that a monster's cage is actually a safe fortress. Dante tries to speak, but the harsh scrape of Maria's voice cuts him down. She steps from the shadows, asking coldly if the targets are buried. Dante gives a heavy nod. Maria simply orders him to wash his hands, treating a brutal massacre like muddy shoes on a rug. But Ella steps between them, her jaw set tight. She grabs his bleeding hands, dragging the most dangerous man in the city toward the basin. He pulls away, muttering he does not need a nurse. Ella glares up at him, her voice cracking like a whip as she orders him to shut up and sit down. In that tense, bloody moment, a faint, genuine smile shadows his lips. It is a stunning psychological beat. Even the most chaotic, violent souls walking this earth secretly crave the firm boundary of someone brave enough to tell them no. The camera tightens into an intimate shot. The water in the basin runs violently red. Ella scrubs the sin from his skin, shoulders shaking with sobs. Dante watches her with eyes black as an ocean trench. He whispers his confession. He left a trail of bodies to send a message. Reaching out, he tilts her chin up. He vows with terrifying sincerity that he will burn the city to ash before anyone takes her. When she asks what happens when they finally kill him, he just shrugs. He does not care if he dies, as long as she is the last thing he sees. He holds her gaze, dragging her into the abyss. You and I must never confuse this with true romance. When blinding obsession disguises itself as love, two damaged people will gladly hold hands walking straight into the fires of hell. Ella holds his collar, knuckles bone white, as if her grip alone could keep him breathing. Dante just shakes his head, looking like a tired king, staring down the ruin of his empire. He pulls her into his lap, hiding his scarred face against her neck, his massive frame shaking. In the heavy dark of their room, the monster finally cracks. He shares a ghost story of his child, a father who ruled with absolute cruelty, demanding blood but never offering warmth. You can hear the broken boy hiding inside the killer's rough voice. Ella holds him tighter, sealing their tragic fate. We need to understand this moment. When a child grows up in the freezing cold, they will spend their entire life mistaking the tight grip of a fist for the warmth of a loving hand. The camera slowly pushes in on Dante, his face half swallowed by harsh shadows. He talks about his mother, a fragile life put out far too early to shield him from a ruthless world. Then comes the deepest wound. He describes being a 17-year-old boy forced to pull a trigger. He fought it, but his father taught him that pity was a fatal poison. So, the boy fired to stay alive. Beside him, Ella traces the aching line of his jaw, softly asking if he feels any remorse. His answer chills the blood. He only regrets how perfectly he learned to kill. Rather than running, she pulls him close, silencing the beast with a gentle kiss. Here is a terrifying truth. A soul shattered by deep trauma will often fall madly in love with the exact same darkness that should make them run. For a passing second, his heavy armor cracks. Dante looks at Ella, his eyes reflecting a desperate hunger to be washed clean. Carrying the crushing weight of his sins, he whispers a fragile hope that her love might actually save him, and she begs him to stay, and his quiet agreement hangs in the air, completely free of his usual violence. She holds onto that promise like a lifeline, but the frame slowly fades to black. Exactly 72 hours later, the illusion of their safe haven shatters. They foolishly thought his terrifying reputation would keep the wolves away. At midnight, the perimeter violently falls, proving a devastating lesson. No matter how deeply you bury the worst parts of your past, your darkest demons will always find a way to kick down the door of your fragile home. The quiet night is ripped apart by the sickening crash of shattered glass. Ella jerks awake, her heart hammering against her ribs as panic floods her veins. Dante breaches the room, already a ghost of war with a weapon tight in his grip. Moving with brutal speed, he shoves her toward the suffocating darkness of a narrow closet. She trembles helplessly, hot tears spilling down her cheeks. He orders her to remain absolutely silent. Right before he shuts the heavy door, he crashes his mouth against hers. It is a bruising, desperate kiss that feels entirely like a heartbreaking goodbye. Then he plunges her into total darkness. It is a tragic reality we must accept. When you give your heart to someone forged in violence, you will inevitably find yourself locked alone in the dark. In the suffocating blackness of the closet, the entire nightmare unfolds in raw sound. Ella covers her ears against furious shouts and the deafening crack of gunfire. A heavy body hits the floorboards with a sickening thud. Then comes the worst sound of all, absolute, heavy silence. Suddenly, the door is ripped open, flooding her small space with harsh light. For one fleeting second, she prays it is Dante. Instead, a cold-eyed stranger levels a weapon right at her face. He calls her a problem, his rough hands bruising her skin as he violently drags her out. You and I must recognize the crushing tragedy here. In moments of pure terror, our fragile minds will cling to any desperate hope of rescue, only to be violently dragged back to reality by the unforgiving hands of a monster. The camera slowly pans across the ruined room, moonlight catching fresh blood smeared over the hardwood floor. Dante, a man who normally commands every space he enters, is forced to his knees with a weapon pressed to his skull. As Ella is brutally dragged into the light, his eyes burn with an agonizing, helpless rage. It is a torturous sight. The fallen king demands her release, his voice dangerously calm, but his captor just smiles, twisting the emotional knife. He coldly points out that the very moment Dante chose to care for her, he painted a massive target on her back. The cruel lesson of this tragedy is absolute. When someone born in darkness finally reaches out for love, they rarely find peace. They just hand their enemies the exact blade needed to tear their world apart. A sadistic smile creeps across the intruder's face, forcing Dante to watch the horror. Even on his knees, Dante does not shake as he delivers a chilling promise of slaughter. Ignoring the dark warning, the man presses the cold steel barrel against Ella's trembling temple. Time slows to a crawl. Ella's mind fractures, her tear-filled eyes locking onto Dante as she whispers a final plea. Suddenly, a deafening roar shatters the room. The bullet does not strike her. Driven by primal devotion, Dante erupts from his knees, disarms his guard, and fires in a blur of lethal perfection. The screen washes red, leaving behind a staggering truth. If you corner a ruthless man and threaten the only thing he truly loves, his blinding violence will defy all logic and tear you to absolute pieces. The heavy blast drops the intruder to the floor. Ella collapses into the corner, curling into a tight ball until the deafening gunfire fades into a ringing silence. Through the settling smoke, she watches Dante standing over the absolute carnage. His chest heaves, his face a terrifying, empty void. He steps over the wounded man, whispers his final promise, and pulls the trigger one last time. Then the ruthless executioner drops his smoking weapon. He falls to his knees beside Ella, his blood-stained hands cradling her face with an impossibly fragile tenderness. It is a haunting paradox we must try to understand. A person can possess a soul cold enough to slaughter without blinking, yet hold you with such desperate warmth that it makes you question reality. Stick with me, because this is where the true emotional wreckage begins. Dante, a man who orchestrates death for a living, is physically trembling. His strong hands shake violently as he checks Ella for wounds. She stares back with hollow eyes, masking her shattered mind, lying through her teeth that she is completely fine. He pulls her tightly to his chest. Terrified, his only tether to humanity is about to break. Meanwhile, Maria wanders the blood-stained house in a silent trance, forcing Dante to call a shadow crew to bleach the nightmare away. It reveals a devastating truth about survival. The heaviest weight of trauma is rarely the violence itself. The true burden is forcing yourself to smile through the bloody aftermath, just to keep the people you love from falling apart. By early morning, the shadow crew has scrubbed the scene with chilling perfection. The blood is gone, but the sick scent of bleach lingers. Upstairs, Ella sits totally frozen. You can scrub a hardwood floor, but you cannot wash a gunge out of a human mind. She is trapped in a looping nightmare, feeling the cold steel pressed against her skull over and over. Dante hovers like a protective shadow, packing bags for a paranoid run into nowhere. When she asks how long they must hide, his dark silence is an admission of perpetual war. Yet, looking at this broken killer, she still chooses to stay. It is a harsh, unyielding lesson. You can pack your bags, cross borders, and drive 1,000 miles away, but your deepest traumas will always ride in the passenger seat beside you. The camera captures a heartbreaking surrender. Ella looks into the eyes of a murderer and chooses him over the light. As she anchors herself to him, Dante's hardened armor shatters. He pulls her close, burying his face in her neck, drowning in guilt and confessing how unworthy he is of her touch. She hushes him softly, her absolute acceptance sealing their dark fate. Under a moonless sky, they vanish. He hands her a forged passport, refusing to say where the road ends. He claims the secrecy is for her protection, and her traumatized mind agrees. We see an agonizing truth unfold. Blind devotion never asks for a map. It simply asks you to surrender your control, close your eyes, and step willingly into the pitch black alongside the very person who endangered you. The endless miles stretch on, thick with suffocating dread. Dante drives with white-knuckled paranoia, constantly reaching out to grip Ella's hand. He uses her warmth to keep his fractured mind from spinning out of control. As dawn breaks, they arrive at the edge of the world, a striking glass house, perched dangerously over an ocean cliff. Dante whispers that this hidden fortress will keep them safe. But as the camera pulls back, framing them against the vast isolation of the crushing waves below, the peaceful illusion shatters. It is a haunting lesson for anyone running from their sins. When your life is built on a foundation of violence, a quiet home is never truly a sanctuary. It is simply a beautifully decorated waiting room, ticking down the seconds until the next war begins. The camera slowly pushes in on a remote cabin swallowed by the dense forest. Outside, it is total isolation. Inside, Dante moves like a hunted animal. The floorboards groan as he paces, checking deadbolts, parting the curtains a fraction of an inch to look for ghosts. Ella watches from the worn sofa, her chest tightening. He finally sits across from her, shadows carving sharp lines into his exhausted face. His voice sounds entirely hollow when he tells her the bleeding will never stop. There is no finish line. That heavy silence crushes the very last spark of hope in her chest. You and I should pause and recognize the quiet tragedy happening right here. When you give your heart to a deeply broken soul, you do not get to pick and choose the pieces. You take their demons and their shadows, making them your own. The air in the room grows heavy and suffocating. Dante stares at the scuffed floor, his shoulders sinking under the weight of a horrific martyr complex. The dim lighting paints him in bruised hues as he mutters his final plan. He genuinely believes his own death is the only currency left to buy her freedom. He views himself as a human shield and nothing more. But Ella refuses to accept this grim script. She crosses the room, her trembling hands gripping his face, forcing his defeated eyes to meet hers. She fiercely tells him she did not walk through hell just to watch him burn at the exit. She demands a real life, not just survival. There is a profound truth woven into this painful moment. True devotion is never found in the romanticized tragedy of dying for someone else. It requires the immense courage to stand up and fight so that both of you can actually live. Dante pulls away, his rigid posture finally snapping under the pressure. He tries to wrap himself in the familiar armor of self-hatred, whispering that his hands are too covered in blood for a happy ending. But the focus stays on Ella, who simply refuses to let him drown in guilt. She steps into his space, breaking every boundary. She presses her forehead against his, grounding his spiraling mind. A subtle, violent tremble shakes his shoulders as she whispers that he is not a monster. To her, he is the single reason she is still breathing. His defensive walls completely shatter right there in that dim light. It is a beautiful thing when you really look at it. A person is never permanently defined by the darkest parts of their past. We are shaped and ultimately redeemed by the fragile things we choose to fiercely protect right now in the present. The frame tightens on Dante as he delivers a cold warning. He tells her bluntly that staying means she will eventually catch a bullet meant for him. Ella does not even blink. She softly replies that she would rather bleed beside him than live a long, sterile life completely alone. That single exchange seals their tragic fate. What follows is a deeply tense domestic routine. The camera lingers on Dante chopping vegetables for dinner, his loaded pistol resting right next to the cutting board. They share quiet meals, whispering about a normal life they know they will never have. Let us take a moment to observe this strange reality together. Genuine peace does not always require a perfect, sunlit room. Sometimes, true peace takes root in the darkest, most dangerous corners of our lives, blooming quietly right in the middle of absolute chaos. The lighting shifts on a cold morning washing the bedroom in a pale, sickly gray. Ella opens her eyes and finds Dante sitting at the edge of the mattress. His spine is completely rigid, his knuckles bone white. He speaks in a dead, mechanical tone, explaining that Marco has called a truce. She is finally free to go. A sudden, staggering wave of relief washes over her face. She immediately asks what it cost him, but he just stares blankly at the wall, refusing to answer. The heavy silence in the room rings louder than a gunshot. The tragedy of this moment is entirely heartbreaking. You and I have seen this happen before in life. When a miraculous escape route suddenly opens up, and it appears to cost absolutely nothing, it is a lie. It simply means the person who loves you is quietly bleeding out in the dark to pay your ransom. Watch the exact frame where her heart completely breaks. Dante looks at her with dead, empty eyes and delivers the poison. She can return to her old life, but he has to become a ghost. If they ever speak again, she dies. He holds out the absolute freedom she wanted, while simultaneously locking the door between them forever. Ella physically recoils, stumbling backward as if he had just struck her across the face. Her chest heaves as she refuses to abandon the deep bond they forged in fire. It is a deeply cinematic tragedy, framed perfectly in the shadows of that tiny room. A vital truth reveals itself in her falling tears. The greatest acts of human sacrifice rarely look heroic when they happen. To the person being saved, absolute devotion often wears the cold and cruel mask of ultimate betrayal. The camera catches the rising panic in Ella's wide eyes. She fiercely challenges him, demanding to know what happens if she simply says no. Dante does not even flinch. He coldly states that her choice has been permanently revoked. He strips away her personal freedom just to ensure her survival. The sheer betrayal shatters her entirely. She screams, her raw voice tearing through the quiet cabin, pounding her fists against his chest. She refuses to survive just to be left completely alone. Dante stands there like a stone statue, absorbing her furious grief without a single word of defense. He holds her trembling body while her spirit breaks. This brutal scene forces a realization upon us. Sometimes, profound love is not about gentle words. It requires the immense strength to absorb a person's absolute hatred just to keep their heart beating. Collapsed against his chest, her defenses finally crumble. She confesses her love, a desperate whisper pulled straight from the depths of her trauma. Dante freezes, his breath catching in his throat. Before he slowly whispers it back, it is their very first true admission, and it lands like the heavy drop of an execution blade. Marco's mandate arrives swiftly, granting them exactly 48 hours to pack up their shared existence. Dante accepts the terms without hesitation, sealing his permanent isolation. The camera simply watches the clock on the wall, ticking down those remaining minutes. You and I need to see the bitter lesson hidden in this cruel ending. The deepest wound of a forced goodbye is never the sudden closing of the door. It is the agonizing, suffocating torture of watching your precious seconds slowly bleed out. The final hours unfold in agonizing slow motion. The screen fills with tight, intimate shots of their last moments together. The slight curve of his jaw, the way her hair falls. They frantically try to memorize every sensory detail before the dark finally falls. In the pitch black of the bedroom, Ella whispers desperate promises of finding a way back. Entirely blinded by denial, Dante just stares into the void, looking completely hollow, insisting she deserves a clean world free of monsters like him. When they finally embrace, she grips him fiercely, trying to brand the memory into her very skin. We are witnessing a devastating psychological turn here. Usually, our memories act as a comforting blanket. But when two souls are violently torn apart against their will, every beautiful memory turns into a chronic, incurable ache that simply will not fade. Dawn bleeds through the cabin curtains in a pale, merciless blue. There are no sweeping musical swells, no grand farewell speeches. The morning is just suffocatingly quiet. Dante pulls her close one last time. She presses into him, desperately trying to create enough friction to stop time itself. A single choked whisper of love is all they can manage before the physical tether snaps. Marco arrives and drives her away. The camera follows as she steps back into her old apartment. Everything is exactly as she left it months ago. The heavy dust on the windowsill, the unread books on the table, but the reflection staring back in the mirror is a stranger. Life teaches us a harsh truth in these moments. You can walk away from a nightmare and return to the exact same room, only to realize the person who used to live there is completely and permanently gone. Months have passed, and the lighting is harsh, clinical, and perfectly normal. Her friend Layla cries, begging for forgiveness for dragging her into that criminal mess. Ella softly forgives her, simply because her heart is entirely too numb to harbor any real anger. She goes back to her job wearing a flawless mask of civilian stability for the world to see. Yet, the camera catches the brutal truth in the dead of night. Her hand reaches across the cold, empty mattress, blindly searching for a ghost. She stares at the ceiling, haunted by the quiet, creeping terror that Dante might already be dead. Society loves to promise us that time heals all wounds, but you and I have seen the reality of this tragedy. Time stops moving entirely when you voluntarily leave the most vital piece of your soul trapped inside a burning building. 6 long months into this agonizing silence, the catalyst finally arrives. Ella stands in the perfectly lit kitchen of her safe house, staring at an unmarked envelope. Inside, she finds nothing but geographical coordinates and 3 handwritten words: "When you are ready." Dante is playing a brilliant, manipulative game here, offering her the devastating illusion of choice. We watch her pace the floors for 3 sleepless nights, a prisoner to her own racing pulse. She is agonizing over the true cost of her soul, weighing the guarantee of a violent death against the overwhelming peace only his presence provides. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality about how we protect ourselves. So often, what the rest of the world calls a peaceful life is nothing more than cold, clinical numbness dressed up to look like safety. By the morning of the 4th day, she sheds her civilian life like a heavy winter coat. The camera tracks her arrival at a quiet house on the city edge. As Dante pulls open the door, genuine shock crosses his face, quickly chased by a dangerous optimism. He spells out the brutal reality, warning her the syndicate will hunt them until their breathing stops. But her heart is set like stone. She steps inside, committing to their shared ruin. Dante frames her pale face in his hands, staring deep into her eyes to verify this mutual death sentence. We can learn something profound here. True loyalty is not about building a comfortable, safe haven. It is about finding the exact center of a catastrophic fire, holding hands, and willingly stepping into the flames together. Dante issues one last trembling warning. He tells her the door will lock behind her forever, but her obsession cannot be swayed. As they crash together in the shadowy hallway, the intensity of their embrace drowns out the looming threat of the guns at their backs. They fall into the grim rhythm of their new reality, whispering about blind spots and paranoia. She cuts off his tactical planning, swearing she would rather die bleeding in his arms than wither away in an empty room. The unmasked joy flooding his eyes is agonizing to witness. There is a deeply human truth here. We often willingly walk straight into a slaughterhouse, giving up every ounce of our own safety, merely for the profound comfort of holding a loved one's hand when the blade finally falls. We jump forward 12 months into the exhausting phase of their shared madness. The underworld never grants pardons, and Dante remains a phantom with a massive bounty on his head. They fled across 3 borders in a year, building the fragile ghost of a home while waiting for the inevitable raid. The scene is painted in the bruised purple of dusk on an unsecured balcony, where Dante softly admits his guilt over letting her stay. This moment forces us to unlearn everything we think we know about healing. True stability in life is not always found in quiet suburbs or peaceful morning routines. Sometimes it is entirely defined by the raw grit it takes to survive one more violently unpredictable day, standing back to back with the one soul you refuse to leave behind. A slow, melancholic smile curves Ella's lips as she makes her final confession. That invisible tether between them was never broken. We drift back to the memory of their first collision, the dark corridor, the way she brushed past his shoulder, the dangerous hum of his initial warning. In that fraction of a second, her fate was sealed, not by force, but by an irresistible gravity. She looks at him now, confirming she would walk into the fire all over again, even knowing it burns them both to ash. She has made her peace with a life measured in blood. The lesson here changes how we view love entirely. The deepest human connections are rarely about finding a safe place to hide. They are about discovering that beautiful, broken reason that makes the deadly fall entirely worth it.